book one auditing frenzy, and it was driving people into the orgs. Now, so anyway, what you had, so you had a lot of injustices coming up, and so this was 1981, and I remember they were having the public, and this is all through the mission holder network, was starting to unite and say, wow. And so they had this big meeting in Clearwater, and they got together, and they were it was like a revolt is what it was, but it was a revolt for, I mean, it reminded me of the Vietnam War era. And so basically they were revolting against some unfair things that had happened to them.
This is a mission holders conference, isn't it?
Yes. And it's very famous. You can read about aspects of it. Now, most of the staff, the management staff were, really didn't know what was going on. Some of them did. Some of them were in the Division 6 areas. Some of the people who were right on public lines in the Flag Service Organization were. And of course, I had very good communication lines. Not only because I worked in Qual, so it was my job to have a very varied viewpoints of everything that was going on, but I also had a lot of LRH viewpoint from having worked in his personal office. I also had extensive communications with the public through my own personal associations and friendships. So I could read, what was going on, not only have data, but actually feel the energy of what was going on. So I actually attended some of those meetings, these revolt meetings, but I didn't sit in the audience. I sat outside and I watched from outside the door. And of course, if most staff went to those, it would have been considered a no-no. I could do it because I'm Qual. I'm there to correct what's wrong, to see what's wrong. So if something's going wrong, it's my job to know it. So I could do it with impunity. But I didn't make a spectacle of myself. Nobody really knew I was there. They could have looked, but nobody was paying attention to me. They were paying attention to the rabble-rousing that was going on by the speakers. And basically, all sorts of grievances were being issued, were being expressed. And you had people from back as far as 1950 in that room who were now there to get their grievances addressed. And it was, and they were getting addressed. And there was a man who was then working in the then Guardian's office. He was a pretty famous character in Scientology. His name was Owen Starkey. Owen Starkey, I had first encountered him on the Apollo when I first got there. I don't know if I met him, but I remember he was going back to Denmark where he worked as a registrar and an executive, eventually a NOTS auditor. And he ended up in the Guardian's office. And he said to me, he says, all lawsuits against the Church of Scientology have been dropped. And the reason they were dropped, suspended might have been a better word, but they were dropped because Scientology began communicating with their adversaries. He actually told me this.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to believe he was lying. But what happened is the mission holders were showing up the staff. In other words, they're having hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. Orgs didn't do this. So all of a sudden, management was being shown up by the mission holders. Now, although they were being shown up in terms of gross income, the mission holders did not pretend to have anywhere near the technical or management skill that the orgs themselves did, including the management org. They were good at dealing with the public. When it came to more precision, they said the orgs are going to do a better job than our missions will.
Did the missions get people up to clear?
No, not at that time. I mean, it was getting into this Dianetic clear phase. So but they would have to be declared clear in an organization at that time. But basically, what the situation was is that in terms of what is it, suppressive PTSD technology, the orgs could, or the management staff could not have the mission holders being so successful. And the mission holders wanted everybody to be successful. And the higher up in management you were, typically speaking, the more anal retentive you were with regards to having issues about the public or the mission holders being okay. So the worst aspect of this was when the current leader of Scientology, David Miscavige, came down to the mission holder meeting because this was a revolt they had to quell. And he came down with David Mayo, who was completely clueless as to what the hell was going on. He was just clueless. He had been working with LRH, doing the Knot stuff, and working on the happiness rundown, but he was clueless as to what was going on with the public at that particular time. A guy named Jens Bogvad, who was a very popular commanding officer in Europe. He was Swedish, and he was mostly known for his work in Germany. But he was there, and Norman Starkey was sent down. I guess he was sent down as supposedly the muscle, and to quell any physical disturbances. And I saw Norman outside the management building, and what's going on? He says, "Oh, nothing's going on. Nothing's going on over there." I thought, no. It's like he was there to dissuade that there was any sort of upheaval.
Yeah.
And of course, I knew him from the ship, and he was essentially full of bull, but using a PR line. And so anyway, I went over there, and Miscavige basically quelled them, told them how he had basically taken over from Mary Sue and presented himself as something other than what he was. They were kind of shocked to hear that who he was. They found out that he was in charge, but he appeased them to a certain degree. And then when he went back and whatever he reported, I don't know what he reported to LRH. I don't know what he didn't, but basically he went and slowly began to target the mission holders and declare them one by one. And then they had a big meeting later in '82 where he declared a lot of them on the spot. And Scientology at that point became a crazy organization.
Yeah.
And it became so psychotic that all this book one auditing phenomena that was going on, they said anybody that had book one auditing now had to go to the org and get an exam so that the org could now have control of that particular pre-clear.
Yeah, hold on. And can I bring up something as well? Yeah, sure. because this is what's going on in the church. It's like the way it is today. Is it's so controlled. It's like the Scientology members that are members of the church. They can't just go out and practice book one auditing, and they can't just practice the tech and experiment with it and learn. Not screw or anything, but they can't just go and do book one. And it just sort of suppresses them and it cuts down Dianetics. So what you have in the church is you end up having just one person trained, and they're usually pretty crap at it in delivering Dianetic book one auditing, and you have to go to the church to get that, and it's just not good.
No, totally. And you see, if one understood the Division 6 policy as written by L. Ron Hubbard, you would see that these groups, gung-ho groups, are supposed to feed the org people, and they're going to feed it. They might feed them 100, and if they're smart, they'll get 10 or 20, and the rest of them might go by. But you just get people reading that original Dianetics book and just feeding it in and getting the enthusiasm, and it's the org's job to capitalize on the enthusiasm, not to control every particle in there and treat it as something that has to be, you have to exert total control over something, and you don't even have somebody who's intelligent to use the technology to make that person want to do Scientology. You start abusing the person rather than just feeding them theta, so to speak. So
Yeah,
this,
and also it's like it's they're making out as if, because this is obviously where this really started to happen, where it became a lot more stricter. They're making out as if it's a dangerous and a scary thing to mess with your case and to try Dianetic auditing without a professional certified auditor at the actual official org. You know, they're making it all scary. Oh no, don't mess with your case and all this sort of stuff.
well, yes, and there is a bulletin written by LRH that said, opening up the mind is, I forget, I used to know this stuff really well, but you open up the mind, there's no danger. It's better to open up the mind than to not open it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But so you basically had people that were ignorant of the actual policies, and there's nobody who was more incompetent and ignorant when it came to the day in and day out policy and technology of L. Ron Hubbard than David Miscavige. He did not understand it, and he was not the only one that didn't understand it because he had seized the power lines. All of a sudden, things were going wacky. Now, it's taken me many years, because I followed the Scientology movement. I left in '83, and I followed the movement on the internet, the various people who've had their falling out and change of heart and whatnot. But it's taken me only in the last few years have I begun to actually able to determine to my satisfaction that L. Ron Hubbard suffered from dementia and, just dementia towards the last years of his life. And it came in different degrees. Now, because as of 1982, the L. Ron Hubbard, and I really don't know what he did say and didn't say, because Miscavige was right there on the focal point. He was in a position to screw everything up.
Yeah, the communications.
Yes, but the thing is that Hubbard was no longer the Hubbard I knew and the Hubbard I had worked for. And I had verified this with one of his messengers, who was much closer to him than I was. She was with him on a day in and day out basis on the ship. And of course, she says, no, this wasn't the same. I met with her last year in New York City, and she says, no, I agree with you. It's not the same.
And what year are you talking about that he started to get dementia?
Well, this is hard to say, but if you go onto the internet and look at the postings, I think it's on the ex-Scientology message board, there's a character called Cowboy,